Now, in a shock move, Boris Johnson has announced he'll not stand for the leadership of the UK Conservative Party. Instead, Michael Gove has thrown his hat into the ring. The Justice Minister campaigned alongside Johnson for the UK to leave the EU. It was assumed that Gove would support Johnson's leadership bid. But in a statement, he said he didn't believe the former London mayor had the leadership credentials. Well, Gove will be up against Theresa May, who's the Home Secretary. She campaigned for the UK to remain in the EU, but she wasn't a vocal supporter and is seen as a unifying candidate. Also running is Stephen Crabb. He also campaigned for the UK to remain in the EU and currently serves as the Work and Pensions Secretary.
I'll seize this chance and make this our moment to stand tall in the world. That is the agenda for the next Prime Minister of this country. But I must tell you, my friends, you who have waited faithfully for the punchline of this speech, that having consulted colleagues and in view of the circumstances in Parliament, I have concluded that person cannot be me.
Brexit means Brexit. The campaign was fought, the vote was held, turnout was high, and the public gave their verdict. There must be no attempts to remain inside the EU, no attempts to rejoin it through the back door, and no second referendum. The country voted to leave the European Union, and it is the duty of the government and Parliament to make sure we do just that.
Well, for more on this story, let's go to Sarah Morice, who is in London now. Sarah, they say a week is a long time in politics. This morning has been a long time in politics. Just bring us up to date exactly where we are.
Well, so many people absolutely flabbergasted with Boris Johnson's decision. There were even tears at his press conference from his supporters. But, you know, he really had been the front runner in this campaign for such a long time. People thought he was going to be the next Prime Minister. But, you know, he was well known here in the UK, across the world. He has this sort of flamboyant political style that people here, whether it doesn't really matter what side of politics you're on, have sort of come to not admire perhaps, but at least like. And so this really was a shock. Now, he of course was the leader of the Leave campaign here in the EU referendum. And the man that was standing next to him through all of that referendum campaigning was Michael Gove. Now, Michael Gove had said that he would be backing Boris Johnson to the Tory leadership and to perhaps being the next Prime Minister. And so at the 11th hour to get this message through from Michael Gove today that no, he wouldn't be backing Boris Johnson, and in fact he himself would be running, is just an extreme case of political backstabbing, I think you could call it, almost playing out like a scene from the political TV show House of Cards. It's quite incredible, and particularly when you think that it was quite strongly worded, Michael Gove's, I guess, rejection of Boris Johnson, because he said, I just really don't think he's up to the job, particularly in this very difficult time that the UK faces, of course, negotiating the Brexit deal that has to be done. But what it does do is leave the way for Theresa May, and she's the Home Secretary here in the UK. This morning she announced that she would be running for the leadership job and of course then the top job as Prime Minister. And I have to say she was impressive in her press conference. She appeared prime ministerial. She had been a backer of the Remain campaign during the EU referendum, but she'd gone about it quietly and she'd managed not to alienate anyone on sort of either side. So her bid is that she can be the Prime Minister that unifies this country, that brings together the Leave voters and the Remain voters, and she says she'll be a good, strong negotiator when it comes to going to the EU and negotiating the Brexit.
So when will there be a new incumbent then in number 10? What's next in this process?
Well, it could be quite a lengthy process. There's about 5 candidates now who've come forward and said they would like to run for the Tories' top job. What happens is, as of next week, the 5th of July, the MPs, the Conservative MPs, will start debating who the best 2 candidates are, and they'll whittle those 5 down to 2. Once they've managed to do that, and that could take some weeks, then the 2 final candidates go out on the hustings, and their job will be to convince the wider Conservative membership base, who will then vote on who will ultimately ultimately be the leader. Now, that should have all happened by the 9th of September. And so after the 9th of September, we will see someone appointed. And then, of course, they start that extraordinarily hard task of dealing with Brexit. It'll be the first job, I imagine, the first phone call will probably be someone from the top brass in the EU saying, right, it's time to trigger Article 50 now. Let's get moving on this Brexit. It's going to be a very difficult job for whoever gets the role as Prime Minister. In a way, it's almost a poison chalice. You would think they'll have a really tough time remaining in that position for a very long time because the negotiating tactics will be, I guess, complex and the job's going to be tough. This country is divided at the moment between Leave and Remain campaigners, so not an easy job for whoever wins.
OK, Sarah, thank you very much.